Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a European political update concerning the elections that took place over the last couple of days in Czechia. We have this chap on the right, as you can see there, and on the right, politically, Andrej Babiš, who has won the election, if you like. We don't know what government will be formed at the moment. It's too early. It's not a first past the post voting system like you see in the UK or the US, whereby, straight away you're likely to see an overall winner in quite a narrow political system, particularly in the United States, where you've only got two parties. Lots of parties here. Depends what government will form as to who will end up being the prime minister. It's very likely to be this guy, Andrej Babiš. And we're going to start off by looking at this negatively, but actually this is a little bit more complex, and it is not all bad news for Ukraine, European unity, the EU, and whatnot. So this is one interpretation. The destructive trio is back. So you've got Robert Fico on the left, Viktor Orbán in the middle, and Andrej Babiš on the right. As far as European elections are concerned, these were parliamentary elections inside Czechia. Just for those of you maybe outside of the European continent, don't understand quite how Europe works. For the EU, you have, obviously each country has their own parliamentary elections, and depends how their government is set up as to whether they have presidents, prime ministers, whatever. And you have all different elections that concern the domestic politics inside a country. Then you have European elections where you are nominating your MEPs, member of European Parliament, who represent a party within your country, but then they go to the European Parliament and then they form, as I keep saying, these coalitions, or they opt into a coalition that is most aligned to their politics domestically and how they would like to see their voice heard on a European level. Babiš's party ANO has switched from the liberal centrists of Emmanuel Macron, as they've shifted to the right and they're now sort of right-wing populists. They are now in the coalition in Europe that is Viktor Orbán's coalition, right? So it gives you a sense of kind of who they are, where they're at. Generally speaking, at least from their political point of view, in their ideology, kind of at the top, it might not fully represent the voters who voted for them in this election, because domestic elections can be quite a bit different, so on and so forth. Okay, so there are layers of complexity here. But, one way of seeing it is this. Yoni Askola saying, just a reminder to Czech readers, even if it won't have an impact, Babiš and ANO are part of Orbán's Patriots for Europe, a traitorous pro-Russian group in the European Parliament. A vote for Babiš is a vote for Putin's favoured candidate and for Putin. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way that's kind of negative here, Tomi from Finland saying, how are Hungary, Slovakia and Czech Republic, all having a history as victims of Russian oppression, heading towards that old enemy again? Europeans can't be that stupid, can they? Apparently they can. Very disappointed in you Czechs. So this is a negative look at what's going on, which is, although it wasn't counted yet. So the idea was, look, ANO are doing well here, and that's not good, because they're kind of pro, to some degree, might be seen as being somewhat pro-Russian or anti-EU and anti-Ukrainian, so on and so forth. So that's your negative view of it. Okay, so let's just read through very quickly this Guardian article. I chose this one because it's quick. It just gives you an overview really quickly. Populist billionaire Andrej Babiš wins Czech parliamentary election. So I've already talked to you. Go and check my Czech video out from yesterday, or my video on the Czech election yesterday, because that gives you an understanding of who all the parties are. I'm not going to go through that again. Who all the parties are, and actually who Babiš is, and he'll be looking to grift. Typical kind of populist, grifter, billionaire, former member of the communists, I think many years back. Anyway, with Babiš's victory, the Czech Republic looks set to join Hungary and Slovakia in refusing support for Ukraine. Populist billionaire Andrej Babiš won the Czech Republic parliamentary elections. Preliminary results show, but fallen short of an overall majority. This win marks a political comeback for Babiš, who was prime minister from 2017 to 21. He is expected to put the country on a course away from supporting Ukraine and towards Hungary and Slovakia, who have taken a pro-Russian path. With the votes From almost 98% of polling stations counted by the Czech Statistics Office, Babiš's ANO Yes party captured 35% of the vote, followed by the pro-Western coalition of the Prime Minister Petr Fiala with 23%. The coalition defeated Babiš in the 2021 election, so they've now fallen short of being able to really take on the ANO party. A two-day election filled 200 seats in the lower house of the Czech parliament. A group of mayors known as Stan, also a member of Fiala's government, received 11.1% of the vote, with an ally of Fiala, the Patriots party, getting an 8.7% of the share. Okay, so essentially the way you can read this is the ANO got 35% of the vote. Okay, but to go into government, you're going to have to get a 50% coalition going. 50.1%, and that's 15% short. Where's he going to pick up the 15% from? Now, the existing kind of coalition, if you like, Petr Fiala's, the existing, that is a coalition of parties, not one single party. It had 23% of the vote. But then there are further parties that might be aligned to them. Stan, which is kind of a localized mayoral kind of party, as far as I understand it, with 11.1% of votes. So that put you up to almost 35%. And then the Patriots party, another 8.7%. Then you're looking over 40% there. That's still not quite enough. Now, Babiš, a self-proclaimed Trumpist, was all smiles and hailed the historic result as an absolute peak of his political career. Voter turnout for this election was high at almost 69%. It's comparatively high. As Babiš's ANO did not win the overall majority, the 71-year-old is expected to be invited to lead talks in forming a new coalition. He has already ruled out cooperation with any of the parties that have been in government after the 2021 election. So there's aforementioned parties he won't go into government with, but then that leaves him with, the following. So his potential partners include the fringe parties Freedom and Direct Democracy, SPD, an anti-immigration party that won 7.9% of the vote. So that puts him on 43%. And then you've got 6.8% from the motorists, a right-wing group called the Motorists. So that depends what the exact percentages is, but that looks just below 50%. He may need to form an alliance with both parties to be able to hold the overall majority. Quote, we will definitely lead talks with the SPD and the motorists and seek a single-party government led by ANO. During its election campaign, ANO advocated for increased welfare spending, so that's where they're going to be attracting people. So remember, it's not just that all the people voting for ANO are going to be anti-Ukraine and or anti-Europe and nominally maybe pro-Russia, although I don't think ANO are particularly pro-Russia. But there are other parties who were, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But, there will be a number of people who would have been not bribed. I mean, this is how politics works, right? You offer the world to a bunch of people who you really want to get voting for you, then they vote for you, and you don't necessarily give them the world. But offering increased welfare and this and that, may have attracted a few people to vote for them. So advocated for increased welfare spending and a reduction in foreign aid, classic at the moment from the right wing, including donations to Ukraine. It also promised higher wages and pensions. So that's a kind of almost left-wing populist ideal there, and lower taxes, that's usually right wing, and tax discounts for students and young families, all in the hope of ending austerity. So actually, I think the Czechs have been hit economically a fair bit since austerity. An ally of the Hungarian leader Viktor Orbán, Babiš has teamed up with a number of far-right parties in the Patriots for Europe group in the European Parliament to challenge the mainstream direction of Europe's policies, including decarbonisation. So kind of typical anti-green agenda, your typical right-wing populists, essentially, not too distant from Reform, MAGA, etc., etc., etc. Okay, Jakub Janda here gives us a little insight into, he works for director of the Center for Security Policy Prague, European Values, Center for Security Policy, a Czech Cyber Command reservists, enemies of Russia, China, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this guy says, Czech election initial summary. What happened? Populist centre-left ANO clearly won with 35%. So it's interesting that he calls it centre left, whereas I would call it centre right, and other people have done so. And actually, but there are elements of centre, when you're looking at the welfare spending and whatnot. But I would and he should know more than me, right? So he's Czech, but I would claim when I did an analysis on Czech politics, not the last one, but the time before, we looked at who the ANO were, and they have moved definitely to the right since for over the years. So if you look at just the Wikipedia page, they are seen as a right-wing populist political party, and it talks about in this wiki page how they have shifted their ideology. So they used to be associated maybe with the centrists. So here it says, ANO's political position is debated among politicians and political scientists. Political scientists historically placed ANO in the centre and centre-right, while in the latter years, a party focused on left-leaning voters and promoted policies described as centre-left, so some of those welfare things, for example, to left-wing until 2024. More recently, BNE IntelliNews evaluated ANO as taking a right-wing direction after it left Alliance of Liberals, so it left the Macron centrists, who was centre right actually, so left them. So the ALDE and Renew Europe is a Macron one in 2024. While other sources have described the party as conservative, centre-right populist, and right-wing populist, Babiš himself stated in an interview in 2014 that ANO was a right-wing party with social empathy. ANO's ideology was widely described as simply populist until 2023, so on and so forth. So yeah, I would disagree with Janda here, and I don't think they're centre-left at all. I think they're centre-right, or just simply right-wing populists, actually. While an incumbent centre-right coalition lost the majority. What to expect? 1. With ANO isolated, the only option is to form a coalition with both protest parties, a far-right SPD, and they really are far-right, the SPD, and it's a coalition of pretty problematic groups, and the hard right motorists, or ALTO, as I think they're called. Any ANO-led coalition with hard and far-right parties will be extremely fragile, since it consists of MAGA-like party, the motorists, far-right pro-Russia party, the SPD, random libertarians, Svobodny, two minor far-extreme parties, PRO and Tricolora. So the ANO will be the most policy moderate part of the expected coalition. Fringe and protest parties will likely lead domestically focused culture wars from their parliamentary seats. I wonder if he accidentally put centre-left there, because they're definitely not, I don't think. Anyway, ANO will be the most policy moderate. Okay, so Russia policy. Expect ANO to keep moderately pro-NATO line within European mainstream, staying mute not to trigger its coalition partners, but keeping much of the policies in place. Likely coalition partners will rhetorically call for peace talks and appeasement, mainly to satisfy their radical voters. China policy, not a major issue for any party. Expect almost no rhetorics on China. Czech national security institutions keep pretty hawkish line, as they did during previous ANO cabinet from 2017 to 2021, which is expected to continue. Much of China policy will likely be driven by Czech President Petr Pavel and uber hawk on China. So more on Petr Pavel later. Good news. The most pro-Russian, and this is what's been missed so far, what I haven't mentioned so far. So the most pro-Russian and pro-Chinese coalition of communists and socialists collapsed. So this was a Stasilo, a party that was polling at, I think, somewhere around 7 to 8%. So you're thinking, right, you have to get over 5% in order to qualify for seats in parliament. And they were definitely pro-Russia, right? And that was a worry, because they would likely have gone into coalition. There was certainly a coalition option. Now, they actually collapsed, failing to make it to parliament, not making the 5% threshold, made only 4.5%. So that is a massive success for this election. This is why I said it's a bit more complex than you think. Yes, Babiš has got in, and you can look at this and go, okay, it's going to be that kind of bloc within Eastern Europe, and that is a problem, right? If this Fico, Orbán, Babiš bloc can upset the apple cart in Europe even more than it's already being upset, then we've got a problem, Houston. But it's not as bad as one might think, because Stasilo did not get in. The fragile coalition setup will increase the power of President Petr Pavel. And now we're going to talk about that former NATO commander, Petr Pavel, really cool bloke. I like him. Very pro-Ukraine, very on it. but then doesn't have the power in the position of president as you have further down, as you do as a prime minister and in parliament, right? So the fragile coalition set up will increase the power of President Petr Pavel, who sets the strategic policy boundaries, EU and NATO membership, support for Ukraine, increased defence budget, and will likely be more visible in foreign policy. So actually he does have some key power in certain strategic areas. And then lastly, the pro-Russian and pro-Chinese elements across Czech politics got a serious beating. Even dominant pro-Russian far-right party SPD dropped heavily from the expected 10 to 12% to a final of below 8%. So the SPD, which is this coalition of the real far-right, also didn't do quite as well. Right, now let's go to another analyst here, Andrej Fiskovich, so born in Belarus, lives in Czechia, informational resistance. He says, seeing some foreign accounts saying that Czech fell into Russian propaganda. Let's clear a situation up a bit. First of all, communists are effed. The polls showed at least 7% support. There wasn't even 5%, so they're not in parliament. Fascists underperformed massively. The polls predicted 12 to 14%, and they had barely 8%. They're not in a position to dictate a referendum on NATO or the EU. Motorists in the ANO declared their support to the alliance, as into NATO. Yes, there might be rhetorical issues on Ukraine, but I predict that business will deliver weapons to Ukraine as per usual. And here's a kicker, right? So when you have Robert Fico in Slovakia saying X and Y on Ukraine, what's happening under the bonnet is that Slovakian military-industrial complex is still going to be wanting to make money, right? And helping Ukraine helps them to make money. So they are still selling stuff and doing business to support Ukraine, even though rhetorically Fico might say something else. Okay, so finally, Fiskovich says, keep calm. There are plenty of support for Ukraine among the Czechs. I will do my part and I will mobilize people as much as I can. Someone else saying Orbán also doesn't really move out the EU and NATO, so he might rhetorically be sounding off here and there, but he doesn't actually make serious moves to get himself out the EU, get Hungary out the EU, because he needs the EU, they need the EU, or NATO. He just roots them within. I don't quite know what that means. He's even more valuable to Putin. The same goes here. He just needs appeasement and populists who will be not our enemy, see no more drones, and at the same time blocking sanctions, buying gas. And as Fiskovich says back, Orbán was like that since the beginning. Fico, on the other hand, lets private business deliver to Ukraine. That was my point. I'm not saying that we cannot go the Hungarian way. Everything is possible with these types of politicians, but from Babis's side, there was no open hostility towards NATO, and I think that's an important point. Final analysis I'm going to give you is from František Kalenda, who I dipped into quite a bit in my video yesterday before the election was finished. So he says on the Czech election, it's worth comparing this year's election on the left here. So this is this year's election, ANO 35%, but just below 35%. So if you're thinking ALO SPD, so that's 7.8. Let's do a little bit of maths. So that's 42 point blah blah blah, but plus a 6.78. That doesn't get you to 50. So interesting. What's going to have to happen there? Stasilo didn't get to the 5%, and nor did Prishaha there. So then you've got the Pirates, Stan, and Spolu, in the centre, the centre right and centre left here getting a decent amount. But I guess what will then happen is these are right. They might get over 50% because these percentages that didn't meet the threshold will then effectively, that what's left will be proportionally expanded to cover what you have up here represents actually 90% of the electorate, because 10% voted for parties that didn't get over the 5% threshold. Then that 10% that gets reapportioned proportionally to all the other votes there. So actually they might be able to now get over 50% ANO with motorists and SPD. Anyway, going back to what Kalenda was saying, it's worth comparing this year's election on the left to the last parliamentary election in 2021 here on the right. So Spolu didn't get a massive amount here, 27.79%. Yes, they've gone down, Spolu, But actually, you've got Stan and Pirates doing okay. Pirates and Stan got 15.6% combined there, and actually they've gone up to 20% now. So it's not too bad. And yeah, you've got, yeah, I don't think it's all bad, really. As you can see, the main difference is the ability of Andrej Babiš to concentrate large amount of anti-government votes, and then, in fact, that other anti-government party, the Motorists, managed to cross the 5% threshold this time. There you get it. Current and former government parties, Spolu, Stan and Pirate, lost absolutely no support overall. That's what I'm saying. You know, they've gone up, but they've gone down. But together, they're about the same, 43.4% to 43.4%. So some votes moved from more conservative parties within this coalition, Spolu, to more liberal ones, the Pirates and Stan. That's a pretty good result after 4 years of government tormented by inflation and the impacts of war in Ukraine. In other words, Spolu have been in government, right? And actually, you would expect them to be massively punished because Czechia has struggled somewhat over the last 4 years, and actually they didn't really struggle. The votes just moved from Spolu marginally to Stan and Pirates, who are somewhat aligned. So it's not too bad. That's a pretty good result, as he says. However, Babiš learned from the fact that so many other parties close to him ended up under 5%, and he managed to concentrate many of their votes. He's then saying that the ANO picked up a lot more than they previously got, 27.12 in 2021, up to they've added another 7-8%. That's going to come from a lot of these smaller parties saying, well, there's no point voting for them, vote for us. So actually stole from some of the smaller parties. At least that's how I understand it. He was also lucky that the Motorists appeared on the scene and managed to pass 5%, even after they left their previous electoral coalition with Prasaha. I assume he also benefited from the takeover of the Social Democrats by Stasilo, mostly hardcore communists. Since Stasilo got very little Social Democratic vote, they most likely chose Babiš instead. Yeah, so there you go. It's not all bad. Depends how easy he's going to find it, Babiš, to form a coalition. I mean, it is going to be a challenge that he's going to go into coalition with the SPD, who are far right, and the Motorists, who are MAGA. So that, again, pretty on the right-wing populist side of things. ANO are going to be somewhat to the left of both of these groups, and they do have a mix of policies, as mentioned, but they are still pretty populist right. And it looks like you've essentially got a 50-50 split. In those that have been elected, that to me looks like, so 43, so that's going to be, you've got a little bit more coming in from, so it's probably like a 53 to 47 right-wing populist to everyone else. And that splits things quite a lot. It depends how parliamentary votes go, I guess, and whether he can make sure that everyone in his coalition sort of votes, because he would need everyone to vote every single time. It depends if people work very much in blocks. And yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about Czech politics, though. But my analysis would be that it's not great for Ukraine. As in, Babiš is not going to be the biggest supporter of Ukraine. It's not great for the EU because Babiš is going to be somewhat aligned to these other Egypts. But it's not as bad as it could have been because the communists didn't get any purchase. And actually, the present government didn't really lose any votes. As in, or the alignment of the present government didn't really lose any votes. I know they're the centre-right, but, opposition essentially has managed to keep, present opposition to ANO and any coalition partners has managed to keep their votes. So, yeah, nuanced. Anyway, that's enough for me. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.